Hi there, YouTube. I'm bored again. Who would have thunk? I have another cab story for you. It's not as dramatic as the other ones, or maybe not for you, but it was for me at the time. I had been a cab driver at that point for about 6 or 7 months or something, and in the beginning I was always very clean shaven and nice clothes and shit. But driving at night, if you want people to not take advantage of you being a youngster and all, you have to dress the part. So I started dressing a little bit like Jack Nicholson in the movie Taxi. Hi, kitty. And not long after I started dressing like that, I have to explain something that the radio system in the cab company that I was driving for, all the chauffeurs could hear each other. So when I called up the central, everybody could hear me and vice versa. And there was this one time, we had this old cab driver. He was actually a pensioner, retired like 30 years earlier or something like that, 25 years earlier. He was 83 years old, and he drove nights maybe once or twice a week to get a little extra money. The state pension here, if you're married, is not very high. He was a very nice guy. He could tell a lot of shit stories about his youth and things he experienced, and I used to chat with him sometimes, sitting in the middle of the night in the cabs, passing the time till the next customer. And one night I was driving down one of the main streets in Copenhagen, and I heard him call alarm over the radio, and all I got was exactly where he was, and he wasn't very far away from me, maybe half a mile or something like that. So I had customers in the cab at the time, and I drove them like fucking crazy fast to their destination point, dropped them off, got the money, and just took off without even closing the doors. They closed when I took off by themselves. And I remember driving like a fucking maniac, because usually when there was an alarm call like this, it was very often a mugging or something like that, or somebody not wanting to pay and trying to fight you in the cab or something stupid like that. And I remember coming around the corner, going over a red light and everything, and just skidding the car around, like drifting around the corner and slamming the brakes, and almost parking my car inside the trunk of his car, of his taxi. And I could see through the window to his back window that there was this big guy sitting in the passenger seat. Here in Denmark, we usually, if there's only one person who is the passenger, they sit next to you, not in the back. And I could see that he was a very skinny little guy, this 83-year-old, and he was sitting like this up in the window, trying to avoid being too close to this big guy. And I thought to myself, he's way too big for me. I mean, at the time I was like a very skinny guy. I am not anymore, but I used to be. And I thought very fast of what I should do, and I decided to just scare the shit out of that big dude. So what I did was I jumped out of my car over the hood and just ripped the door open, grabbed the dude by the hair, he was pretty long hair, and just pulled him with all my might out of the cab. And since he wasn't prepared at all, there was no resistance. He just came out of that cab like a big 300-pound sack of potato and landed on the street with his face down. And I took one of his arms and bent it up on his back and sat on it. And then I screamed into his ear, "If you move, I'm gonna fucking break your arm, asshole. Just lay still. Don't fucking move." And the guy just lay totally still and said, "Yes, yes, sir. I will lay totally still right here. I will not do anything." And what he didn't realize that the dude sitting on top of him was maybe, I don't know, 160, 150 pounds or something like that. And he was at least 250 pounds and he was fucking big. And while I was sitting there, the cops came and of course they cuffed him and everything and threw him into the cab. And I was just like, what the fuck did I do there? I mean, if he had known how little and thin and scrawny guy I was at the time, he could have just rolled over and like tore off one of my arms and beat me the living shit out of me with it. I don't know what got into me, but it's one of the more funny things I remember from my cab days. And after that, there was a couple of cab drivers that often called me over the radio when there was trouble, because I was apparently very good at scaring the living shit out of idiot passengers, which I find kind of hilarious. And as this is a very short story, I have another one. I remember it was pretty early in the evening, the sun was still up, and I was driving down this street in Copenhagen where there's a hospital not far down the street, about maybe 400 or 500 yards down the street. And there was this couple. They look pretty scrawny, you know, like worn out and poor and worn out clothes and stuff. And they were waving at cabs, and most cabs just drove past them. But I didn't. I thought, well, I hadn't made much money that night, or that evening, so I thought, what the hell, I needed the cash. So I pulled over and they got in. They got in the back seat, and not 10 seconds after they closed the door, the woman was sitting right behind me. And the dude was sitting on the other side of the car. And he started punching her, like out of fucking nowhere. And I turned around and I told him, "You don't stop punching her, I will come over and I will fucking break your hand." And he just kept on punching her, and she was screaming bloody murder. And I didn't want blood in my car because, I didn't want to clean my car. So I just slammed the brakes, and the dude... the woman slid under my seat almost, and she was a very small woman. And the dude, he also kind of fell off the seat, and he was trying to get up, and I ran around the cab and just opened the back door, and I pulled him out, and I pulled him out all the way out of the car, but he wouldn't let go. He just grabbed the car, the door like this, and the door opening with the other hand. And I pried his right hand off my door, and I told him that if he doesn't let go of my fucking door, I'm going to slam the car door on his fingers. And he just didn't want to let go, and I could see the cops were coming, and I tried to wave them over, and they saw that there was some shit going on. And he just wouldn't let go, and he was trying to crawl into the cab again to beat more on this woman. And then I thought, what the fuck, and I just slammed the door. And his fingers were still in it. And then I opened the door, and he fell screaming to the ground, and the cops came over, and they just looked at him and said, "Well, we know you, we know what kind of piece of shit you are." And they cuffed him and told me that they were going to put him to the ER, take him to the ER, the hospital, just like we were parked almost right next to it. And then said that if she has any money, drive her home and forget about it. And I was pretty sure that they would give me a fine or something for being violent against this dude, but nothing happened. I never heard from them ever after that. So being a cab driver at night, even in peaceful Copenhagen back in the 80s where there was not much crime, was kind of interesting. I can only imagine how interesting it must have been in the 70s and 80s in I don't know, New York City, for instance. Holy crap. I wouldn't dare do that if I weren't armed to the teeth. That's for fucking sure. If it's this bad in Denmark in the 80s, in the beginning of the 80s, it must have been shit in the United States in the 70s in New York City. Holy crap. Well, that was all for today. Peace and don't panic.